Hey everyone, hope you had a good lunch. We are back for the afternoon sessions here at the Data Octagon. We have great panelists, as always. We're going to have a couple more after that, so I hope you're comfortable, you've grabbed your popcorn, and you're ready to get pummeled with knowledge about data mesh, data fabric, and other trends in data management, because that's what we're going to talk about here. Let's have a little around the table and introduce ourselves, starting with you.
My name's Alex Dean. I'm one of the two co-founders of Snowplow, also CEO. Snowplow is a open source software company. We're in the data space, and we help organizations to create very rich proprietary first-party data about how their own customers and consumers interact with their digital products and services so that those organizations can improve those products and services. So we're in the data creation space.
Okay, interesting. We'll put a pin in that. That's a good topic, creating data. How about you?
I'm Tom. I'm coming from Collibra. Collibra is, we like to call ourselves the data intelligence company. So what Collibra basically does is we have a cloud platform where we have a couple of products all around helping our customers make their data more intelligent. So it goes from pure data governance, which is really our bread and butter. This is how the company started, to data cataloging, making sure that we have an inventory of all the data that the customer have in their data landscape, to data privacy, making sure that they feel that they can be compliant, that they use the data in a way that they effectively can use the data, to data quality, understanding the quality of all the data systems, or all the data from the different systems, and being able to roll that up until the report level, for example. And then last but probably not least is the data lineage, understanding how your data flows in your organization.
Right.
So in a nutshell, that's what Collibra is doing.
Okay.
Right, so my name is Erik Herou. I work at H&M Group, the retailer, and I'm one of two lead engineers of a team who's been since mid last year. We've been building up a foundation framework, principles to enable our bigger set of product teams, more or less data-centric, to be able to go into the data mesh practices, to be able to share, make better use of their data, and try to work in the fashion that data mesh suggests, really. It matches well with the product-centric way of doing things that we're transforming into.
Excellent. Well, I think we have a good panel here to be able to answer some questions, both from a vendor perspective, from an implementer perspective, and from an entrepreneur perspective, perhaps. And I think the question that keeps coming up, and one that I'm curious about as well, is, let me just start with an analogy. A lot of people say that deep learning and neural networks and all this kind of stuff is nothing new. It's been around forever. In fact, mathematics has been around forever, and nothing is new. But there are some precursors to the data mesh and these things, and I'm interested in maybe quantifying what this word means compared to those precursors. So, you know, we've had master data management for a long time. What's new in data mesh and that kind of stuff? We've had, you know, when we had companies like Cloudera and others talk about data lineage maybe 10 years ago almost. What's different about data lineage nowadays? So what would you say are the differences between data mesh as we talk about it today and these precursors that people might be familiar with already?
I mean, I think it's amazing to have like a data mesh practitioner here that's putting data mesh in. My understanding of it is that it's a response to just these centralized architectures just getting too unwieldy, and just trying to build these central data platforms and putting everything into the cloud data warehouse or lake. Just complex organizations have just outgrown that. I don't know if that's what you guys have seen.
Yeah. Your question was you took it back to maths, basically, right? So when it comes to data, I might not take it that far, to be honest. I mean, given that I'm 22 years in the business, what I remember coming up post-mainframe, which was very centralized, was data warehouses. That was the big thing, right? All the data all had to be in a single data warehouse so that all the departments could benefit from that. More recently, with big data, we took a different approach. Instead of being a top-down consolidation in data warehouse, we saw actually the opposite, more like a bottom-up approach, that everybody could throw their data on the data lake, and then automatically we expected something to happen from that. And obviously we all know that data lakes are not the solution. They make a lot of things, certainly if it's in the cloud, they make a lot of things way easier. However, they don't really solve the problem without something else.
Yeah.
So the next thing that you then start to see is that we move towards a combination of data warehouse and data lake, and we refer to that as data lake houses, right? Where you see the same principles of, okay, top-down-ish implementation on a data lake, of a data warehouse on a data lake. So what you then see is that you go from raw zones, where everybody can dump their data, to refined zones where the data gets prepared for consumption, and to ultimately to consumption zones in the data lake house.
Bronze, silver, and gold.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I think what I find personally super interesting about data mesh is that they still tackle something that we, in those few steps that I just highlighted, they tackle things that we kind of oversaw a little bit, is putting the business more front and center. So what I mean with that is one of the concepts of data mesh is centralized domain ownership of the data. And why I personally feel that this is actually the way to go is because the business knows the data. Right? If you would go with too much a top-down single view of how your data should be centralized, is you're going to lose your business.
Okay.
Right? And by putting the business back into picture, you're putting really the specialists around the business, not about the data per se, but specialists about what the data actually means from a business perspective. You put them back in charge. And I think that's what I personally feel is one of the key things that data mesh brings to the table. It's not a technology, it's more a concept in my opinion, right? It's not tangible, right? But and that's what I like so much about data mesh. And I'll leave the second thing that I like maybe for your second question.
Yeah. So are you a conceptual person or a tangible person? How does
both. I mean, the mesh ideas, it really answered to some of the pains we realized was coming. I mean, a few years back when we saw both as I mentioned, the going towards the product-centric organization, all these teams are going to be much more they're savvy. They're going to produce data, they're going to use data. And I mean, not only at our company, everywhere data is more a part of operational solutions. It used to be something that came out of operations, and you took it somewhere and you made intelligent analytics, you came to certain insights, and then you did something. But now everyone uses data back into operations, or even just all over operations. So the nature of data changes. And also that means that the speed and scale, not only in like volumes, but the scale of entities and the complexity needs to be managed. And all these super skilled central data teams, I mean, we have had a massive data team for a couple of decades at H&M, building this very big, actually several big data warehouses, served the purpose. They took this messy data, made it usable for reporting, standardized reporting, so everyone had the same response, same definition all the time. But now it needs to be, when it comes in, not something new. It needs to be somebody who knows that data needs to be able to serve it to somebody who needs it super fast. I mean, as a pilot, I want to use it the same day maybe. And with this domain-centric and product-centric way of treating data, you can really scale it out to infinity. You're not depending on anything central except for as little as possible, and that's where we are in our core team, trying to enable those players with whatever the minimalistic kits they need to have to be able to work this way.
Yeah.
There is something to be said about, now we're talking about data as not as necessarily purely a byproduct of continuous operations. You get your credit card transactions and whatnot, and then when you're going data-driven, you're trying to think, well, what more data can I have that I can base my decisions on, and you create data purposefully to be able to steer things and that kind of thing. And so when you have data as an asset, maybe you think about its life cycle the same way you think about other tangible asset life cycles, both the beginning
definitely.
and the end. Does the business have the requisite tool sets to be able to think about, it's one thing to talk about the technical aspects like data typing and date formats, but do they think about data life cycle from an asset perspective, you know, the value decreases over time. How are we going to archive it, and all that kind of stuff.
I think that
is that too technical? Are we there yet?
I think we're not there yet, but I think we're getting there. So I think that's a really good observation. So what we're seeing in the market is people moving from, you know, almost like grappling with this sort of digital exhaust. So, you know, the kind of the data is a byproduct of your transactional systems, your SaaS systems, and like the amount of data prep people have been doing on that stuff with ETL tools for years, it's just a huge sunk cost. And I think you're right. People are moving into, no, hang on, like I want to compete with, you know, the FANG guys, the big guys. I want to create my own data, and I want that to be my organization's view of the world, and like the entities and the workflows that make sense to my organization, not just, you know, the CRM I've bought. And I think as that happens and you get into that data creation world, you definitely get into a kind of a data as an asset world, and we start to leave behind those like silly metaphors about like data as oil and all that sort of stuff. It's like, it's not that, it's an actual asset. But I think we're quite early on the journey of like, you know, how do you capitalize that on your balance sheet, or how do you describe that stuff? And I don't think a lot of the vendor systems are really quite there yet either. But I think it's changing.
Let's put a pin in that one, how you quantify the value of your data assets, because that's something I think we can do another round about. But what do you think about in terms of the maturity of you know,
the business,
the vocabulary when it comes to your data assets?
I think over the past few years, I think I see a higher maturity, definitely. I do have some questions about, I mean, given the fact that data specialists have always been centralized, or mostly centralized, that the business doesn't really have the acumen yet. But they're realizing that they need to take ownership, in most enterprise companies that we work with.
I'm going to toss an extra question here. Do data mesh and sort of decentralized data science go hand in hand?
Yes. However, I do think that you still need to have, I prefer the term federated, to be honest, because federated implies that you still have something which is centralized, lightweight, lean, but it comes with some kind of like centers of excellence or best practices, or does the choices of platforms or tooling. Then the business, they don't want to be bothered with selecting the best or the right tool or the best framework, right? They just want to be told, like, this is how you do this in the most optimal way, but let them do it themselves. And I'm a firm believer that actually it's something in between centralized and decentralized. It's federated, in my opinion, where you actually have a chief data officer or a data office team that really puts those guidelines, and then that gives complete freedom to the lines of businesses. That's what I see. But can I come back to data as a product as well? I think that whoever came up with that term is a brilliant move. By the way, by trade, I'm a product manager. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to see data as a product, because it has a life cycle, right? And what is so super good about it is that the notion of a product is something the business understands. Right? They've been producing products, real tangible products for their customers, and they understand that products have a life cycle. If they can feel the same about all the data products that they need to deliver to the organization, they will understand that it requires effort, that it requires a lot of time, it requires solid documentation, it requires to package the product, right? It's not just throwing data at somebody, it's just making an API which is immediately consumable. It's about, we can talk about that indeed later, it's about pricing it, making sure that, I mean, ultimately the effort that you put into it is somehow compensated. So I think that, for me, when I saw that the first time, I thought, yes. I think I saw it first at a Gartner conference somewhere. I said, yeah, this is it. I want to be a data product manager going forward. And that's why I went to product operations, by the way. So, yeah, for me, that's one of the cool things about data mesh as well, is it really positions very clearly data as a product.
Cool. I think being more or less mature determines what is the catalyst, whether it's more from IT or more from the business and that kind of thing. How is it at H&M? Does the IT group or the engineers, let's say, come up with things and then say, is this good? Or is it more the businesses say, is this even possible? And then the IT people say, yeah or no? or maybe in between?
Yeah, something in between. I mean, that's also connected to our reorganization. We became this business tech organization, started about 3 years ago, just because of that realization. Like business tech, ordering things from IT, the classical structure, that wasn't sort of tuned to the modern times. So we actually have most of those who used to do that today is business tech, which is really. These products, they build tech, but they do it in the context of business, with business people. And it resonates very well also with, I think, how the data aspect of data product should be developed. And those who actually know supply chain are those who also deliver the data around supply chain. Both as in like an API streams, but also at data at rest in some place where you can do like massive querying of it. Maybe a different role, of course. I mean, if you're a business person or if you're a data developer, but they work together, serving that whole thing.
I'm a big believer in the data product concept. I think it makes so much sense. Like sometimes we call them kind of almost data intensive products, because you want to make that all products are data products. So you want to make the distinction that we're talking about products that really need very rich, high volume, variety, whatever data to power. But it really works, and like I think the work that Snowflake are doing around kind of the idea of more and more products of a business moving into the warehouse or on top of the warehouse, the connected apps thing. I think that's very interesting. I don't know how quickly that future will come, but I think it's one to look out for.
I'm wondering, when we're trying to, let's circle around this product thing here a little bit. Traditional products, people are pretty familiar with how to price them, what the value of even intangible products like IP, logos, and whatnot. I mean, we're sort of familiar with it, at least. There are, one way of measuring it might be in terms of its performance as a function of maybe a service or something that's offered with that product as the foundation. And I guess the question is, there's many ways of measuring the efficiency of a product. The worst way is the pure engineering way, where you're measuring uptime or something arbitrary that's meaningless in the context of the business, and
cost to produce it.
Yeah,
cost to maintain.
Or latency or something. But the business might want to measure, customer net satisfaction, something like that.
Yeah.
Is that a part, sort of that quantification of the output? Is that a part of the data mesh and the how should you say? Collecting of the data assets, So what do we have? Well, okay, we have 50 gigabytes stored here. Yeah, sure. But what is it? What's it worth? Do you measure that in terms of output? What have you guys seen in your practice as a way that people quantify what the effect of the data mesh is? In a business measurable sense.
Yeah, if I can maybe go first, is what I've seen and what we're building, what we to some degree already have in the product, what we're building towards is really a data marketplace experience. Right? If you talk about products, but you don't have a way to sell your products, there's no single place for consumers to come, then basically you're there with your product, right? And you're kind of stuck.
You mean inside an organization?
Inside or by...
Or it could be an external.
Could be outside as well, right? You have a lot of public data that sometimes is either made available for free, or that, think about Reuters and Bloomberg, and that actually already are in the business of selling data, right? But what we are working towards is really a data marketplace experience, where if lines of businesses produce new data products, and that's what's so good about the data products, like you can define what that, clearly define what that is, right? And you package it up and you put it on a data marketplace. So the data producers, basically the lines of businesses, they build data products, they make them available in a data marketplace. On the other hand, you have the rest of the organization that needs data in some shape or form, but not necessarily knows who to ask for that data. So data can come as data consumers, they can come to that data marketplace, find all the different data products there are, look into it, know who owns the data product, know what it's about, maybe already view some samples, right? Is this really what I need to be able to do my analysis? And then you can give them some kind of a checkout experience, right? Literally like online, right? You put it in your data basket, and then immediately you have those connections to the different data sources where those products are where they live, and you immediately get access. And if you can build that kind of experience, I think then you're ready to start price your products as well. Right? But otherwise, I mean, how are you going to price? If not, there needs to be some kind of a marketplace where you see demand for products and you see an offer. And like in traditional economics, demand and offer determine the price.
But okay, but then there's two marketplaces we're talking about. We have the internal marketplace and what it's worth in terms of catalyzing new projects,
ROI,
innovation, that kind of stuff. Well, I mean, the thing is, imagine you are, Zillow in the U.S. Are you guys familiar with Zillow? They set up, they have a website where people can find houses that are for sale, but they had other aspects of their business where they would algorithmically buy houses and then sell them.
That didn't go so well.
Well, I mean, one of the things is it wasn't necessarily a function of the accuracy of the model itself. It was a function of, their business model, how much how much liquidity tolerance they had, and other things that weren't really related to the data or the model or anything. It was a business strategy thing. And so, but they could probably have quantified what the value of the data that was the foundation for that model and the data was in terms of turnover of the company.
Yeah.
And that's like an extrinsic measurement.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen, so if you think about Snowplow, so we're in the kind of data creation space, we're quite like, we're typically upstream of the warehouse or the lake or the lake house. And I think one of the things I'm excited about with data mesh is we've seen over the years a lot of our users and customers, their data platform teams, their data ops teams, and they've ended up quite disconnected sometimes from the actual value of the data. So they know it's really important to get an ETL tool in, to do to put something like Snowplow in as well, but they don't necessarily see what data products are being built at the other end.
Exactly.
And that's what I think is exciting about data mesh, is the idea that actually you can start to connect the producers better through to the consumers, and people can understand, okay, actually the quality of this data is really important, and we've got some blind spots on this thing, so we should add that in. But I think we probably over-centralized over the last few years, and now probably we're now we're going.
But I think that's also something we've heard from our internal data science community, that they after a while they really learn the data they have in the data lake.
Yeah.
We have the data engineering team. Of course, they know what they serve, but also the consumer teams who are almost decentralized, like you mentioned, decentralized data science, because they have many different teams. They do data science within those advanced teams. They need to learn their data and want to collaborate on how do I share with my data science colleagues which data set is the best if I want to look at a certain event. We have 3 of them. Which should I use? And I mean, the engineering team sent us some description, which is good documentation, but as a data scientist, I want to add. So giving them some sort of scoring, wiki-style sharing capability has been found pretty popular.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I agree. And that kind of comes with that data marketplace experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you think about Amazon, right? If you buy a product, what's the first thing that you're going to do?
Yeah, it's reviewing.
Right? You go to the reviews.
Yeah.
So, and there's so many things that you can see in real life product marketplaces that you can just apply to data as well. Right? Ratings and reviews, the ability to ask questions to each other on a certain product, immediately knowing who's the expert, being able to compare stuff with each other. So all of those things are like really cool features that data mesh brings to the table, and that can be made available to the data consumers.
What if people say they don't have enough data?
They should create more. No, I'm being flippant, but I think it's really important in any organization to figure out what is the data that is bespoke to your organization, and make sure you're getting that. Make sure you're collecting that, you deeply understand that, you're tracking the quality of that. Because everyone gets a cloud data warehouse and they put Fivetran or a Matillion or Airbyte in front of it, and they pull in their CRM records. But everyone's doing that. But every company has its own data that's proprietary to it, whether it's IoT or consumer behavioral or whatever it is. And I think you've just got to try and get that into your business as soon as you can.
But you were joking, but it's sort of true that create the data.
Yeah, you have to. Because every business is in some way unique and has workflows or entities or behavioral flows that are bespoke to it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset of software development. They used to be black boxes and then some input and output, but these days you should maybe emit more as like very betting very strongly, like everyone, on events. I mean, maybe you shouldn't only emit the events. That's the end point of things. Rather, it'd be pretty noisy. Like, is somebody somewhere in the company could be interested in this event happened inside my box?
Yeah.
Just emit it.
Yeah.
That's a service to the others.
Exactly.
Maybe that's important somewhere.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, data mesh also preaches the fact that it's not just about the data products, but it's also about creating more opportunity to build new products from existing products. Right? And to your question, like, what if there's not enough data?
Yeah.
Maybe there is, but you just need to still combine it and then
that's a great point.
build a new product and make that again available on the data marketplace for people to consume.
Yeah, we talk sometimes about kind of different altitudes of data, and all of those higher altitudes, they just come from building, pulling together, aggregating lower levels. So I totally agree.
Yeah.
Derivation.
And also from the business development point of things, but also a good way to find out what do you actually need. Like, we want to do these things. We want to try this new business practice online somewhere. What data would I need to stand on to be able to build the algorithms, to evaluate, to execute? And then just drill down into actually, okay, what actual data, does this data exist somewhere? Is there a process where we have the data that we can throw in a hook? And I mean, not the old school of going to a source system and extracting, but rather, okay, so we want to have this data, I wish this data product did exist. Who could be that data product? Do we need to start a new team, or is it somebody's responsibility?
No, it's true.
Production.
I still remember one of the early days at Collibra when we started to play around with machine learning. Our data scientists say, I need more tag data. Right? I cannot build a model if I don't have any tag data. So as a product manager, I was like, and again, coming back to your question, like, what if there's not enough data? So what we did is we find clever ways to make our users of our platform create new data by asking them, is this related to each other? Yes, no, right? And like that, you create new data. Maybe another idea to, what if there's not enough data? I think that in the world there's definitely enough data, but people don't necessarily have access in enterprises to external data. So what if we could make a data marketplace for the world?
Yeah.
Right? And again, aligned with the philosophy of having standards around how data products look like, and a platform that really allows everybody for data that can be shared, obviously. Sometimes you need to be sensitive about that as well.
Yeah.
But there's like a global marketplace as well, where you can just go and shop for data. That would be brilliant.
I'm going to ask the same question to you guys that I asked the panel before on a totally different subject, because, you know, I agree with the stuff that you're saying, where getting started builds momentum, and you might not have data in the beginning, and you can bootstrap that stuff by asking a bunch of teenagers to tag data manually, and then it sort of builds momentum, and more data will come by itself when you have more systems in place and that kind of thing. But then, okay, so here's a question. The question is it more important to be fast or to be efficient when implementing this stuff? You can't say both, obviously.
I think you've got to be fast to get a proof of value quickly. So like I'm talking more about like blank slate, new projects, new setups in an organization. But like in video gaming, they have the concept of a spike, right? Where you spike through the whole game just so you get a feel for the whole thing. And I think that's really important in data. I think you need to like just get the vendors, get the philosophy quickly, and just spike through to a use case. Just get some value, just demonstrate some value, because I think if you get into this whole kind of like, well, we're going to do a year and we're going to do a load of like, metadata and integration, and then we're going to do this, it's just too slow. And people just want to see the value quickly.
Who here has heard we can't do anything because the data's no good and we have to spend a year cleaning the data before we can even get started thinking about projects? I've heard that one before.
Yeah, definitely.
Many times. And then I always try to really ask people like, but what is not good enough? Right? Because I mean, if some data sets have like hundreds of different data elements, but which 5 do you really need? And what is the purpose, right? For what kind of purposes will you use the data? And sometimes 90% data quality is just good enough for the purpose that at hand. Think about marketing campaigns. Marketing doesn't want to pay for heavy quality rules and manual rules that need to be built for the quality. Because if they reach from that 90%, let's say email addresses, 90% good email, they're targeting to get 50%, right? So
It's good enough.
it's good enough.
Yeah.
However, if this is about, let's say, about medical data, right, and the purpose is to alert anybody who has some kind of a risk, then you better make sure the email address is correct, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it all depends. So I hate to say it, but it all depends
Okay.
on the
Okay.
context of your question.
What do you think? Fast or efficient?
I think, like you said, like fast in the beginning, just to get started and prove the value, prove that this way of working is, or method or whatever you want to do, is a good thing to do, and then you can build momentum, and then as it scales, of course, efficiency is important, because otherwise cost is going to just increase too much.
Yeah,
but it's something to learn. Just show first that this is something we should be doing, and learn from that.
Agree.
I've experienced that a lot of times you don't find out that the data's no good until you actually try to use it for something.
No.
So, you'll find sales that have happened in the future and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, like, you have to start using it at some point. You can't wait
Yeah.
till it's good before you use it, because...
Yeah, the users
never
tend to find that. So
Right.
they come back to you as a data team. They're like, what does this mean? And then you understand that this shouldn't be at all. That it needs to be out there and get tested. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
What role do technical tools play in all this? I mean, how technology-driven is this?
I think data quality specifically, I mean, we need to, like, as I say, what I said, it has to be proven or found. It's, of course, the wrong way to discover that you have the wrong data after you have acted on it. But with the right tooling, you could be able to automate more on that. Like, but there's so many perspectives to data quality, and things like sales in the future, it could be on the most advanced one, maybe, like the business rules. You want to do like the profiling kind of things, checking for certain patterns that has to or can't be there. Easily automated, you can buy stuff off the shelf basically.
Yeah.
But then if you want to check these things, or you want to see that somebody hasn't registered there first before they should have been there first, and that kind of complex thing that only the domain experts actually know, they need to be coded somewhere. And also good to give them some sort of frameworks. That's also things we look at from the central team. Like, we will have these specialists. Where do they put their rules? Do they just, out of a blank sheet, code something somewhere? That's not really good. It's better if they share.
Yeah.
So, but it's a pretty flexible tooling they will need.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in tooling. I mean, I co-founded a vendor, so I would be. I think one of the challenges is there's not a lot of standardization in the tooling at the moment. So, you look at the modern data stack, it's incredible, it's exciting, it's like a Cambrian explosion of vendors. But, even for us as a vendor, it's like, well, who do we integrate with in these different parts? So, like, there's so many vendors in data observability and data quality and things like that. And if it's tough for us as a vendor, it's tough for data teams as well, right? Because like they've got to make those decisions, and like if they want to swap from one vendor to another, but they bake that vendor into all their processes and and workflows. So I think we're at a very interesting time at the moment where there's a ton of vendors, but like there isn't a lot of standards at work.
I completely agree with the lack of standards.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to integrate with so many different.
You guys,
I mean, it's actually amazing how much effort and investment that we put into that.
Yeah.
While, I mean, you don't really immediately see the value add of yet another certified metadata integrator. On the other hand, I want to come back to the question of how important are tools. The tool is just a tool. I probably will speak against my own shop here, but the tool, if people do not want to change, right, do not want to embrace that data quality is important, or that producing data product is the new way forward. I think people first need to be skilled, upskilled, need to be taught, need to learn, need to be willing to change, they need to believe that this is the way forward. That's by far probably the most challenging aspect of anything data. Second, we need to have good frameworks. You already alluded to it. You have processes. And I think what a tool does really well, once you have those two in place, it allows you to scale. It allows you to say like, no, I'm not going to do all of this manual anymore, but now I'm going to automate everything. And instead of having to hire 100 people to do a simple job, you can buy a tool that does all the work with 2 or 3 person supporting it.
Right.
I think that's what tools do really well, and I mean, we're in the boat business, right? We try to help our customers scale, to do it faster, more efficient. But ultimately, if their users do not want to use our tool is nothing. Right? And I think that's something we need to keep in mind as a vendor, but also as the people like in your business that purchase tools. Like the tool will not do the work for you. Right? No. You need to make the tool work, but it's still work to make the tool work.
Yeah, it's the process and ways of working that's maybe needs to come first, and then we realize we need help with this. And is there a tool for this?
Exactly.
Yes, there is a tool. Let's check it out.
Yeah. Some tools are better than others.
Of course.
It's better to use Jira than sticky notes.
Yeah, I love the sticky notes.
And still everybody is using sticky notes.
Sticky notes, yeah. I think when tools have powerful workflows baked in that help teach processes, that's really powerful. That's
really the thing, that a lot of tools, and I think this is something that people miss. The nice thing is when tools are standardized in such a way that they build in best practices. So they force you to do software engineering best practices or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think a lot of people aren't aware that those best practices even exist, at least among business users.
And that's why it's so important to be customer-centric. So anytime you build a new feature or a new capability, watch how your customers are using that feature. And learn from how they use and improve. Or, like in our case, sometimes we ship glossaries. Like if we see that every single customer starts with building a glossary and you have industry-specific terms, why don't we just try to capture that and make it available as a sort of a best practice that we see in our user community. So that's, I agree. So that's how we can help as vendors, how we can help make implementations go faster, allow our customers to get faster to value by repeating best practices that we see with other customers, and obviously learning from those in terms of improving the product. I think the same can apply probably to data, or even within companies, that some departments will do things really well. And then if you have a center of excellence, coming back to that federated model, that can say like, oh, wow, this team here does that really well. Let's give them a forum. Let's allow them to explain towards the other data specialists in the company how they've done it, so others can learn from it.
Yeah.
I think that's probably valuable.
I'd like to hear the other side of the coin, because given that you've implemented this in practice, I would like to hear the war story where it's very easy here at conferences to say this is how you do it right, and of course we do it right, and things are good and whatnot. And the best talks at all these conferences are always where a guy says, or a person says, I tried it and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, that's fine. It doesn't have to. And the story's super interesting.
Yeah.
So like, what doesn't work in your experience?
In data mesh specifically?
I mean, we've been talking about getting people to learn and accept results, understand how they need to take initiative to create data. What trips people up and gets people to, get projects stuck because of data problems and that kind of thing?
I mean, everything big upfront tends to not succeed. Like
big upfront. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of analytics, thinking, designing everything, the perfect product. I mean, certainly we've been guilty of doing that. Right? Okay, we would need to have this very advanced platform. What do we need to put in it? Let's work with requirements and document and good thinking, good reasoning, good requirements, but just collecting requirements. It tends to become a dream product, super complicated, will never get built, and you waste a lot of time. Versus pilot. I have an idea. What's the absolutely smallest MVP we can build to try it out? It always works. Maybe you get some technical depth, but you get something out.
That's awesome.
That's a good one. I would say completely organic doesn't really work. So we kind of accidentally ran a very interesting experiment at Snowplow where we obviously have incredibly data literate people in the company who are great at producing data, like writing SQL, using dbt, all those kinds of things. But until very recently, we didn't have a central data team. So it was a pure organic bottom-up experiment. and that doesn't really work. So like we're now going through a process of doing domain design, thinking about our entities. I don't think it means we need to go to a super centralized model, but I've seen internally that like pure organic, everyone for themselves, doesn't work. You get some metrics, you get some reporting, you can build some data products, but doesn't scale.
But that's tying back into what you were talking about before, federated, which is sort of a sweet spot where you have people, because what we see is these ivory tower data scientists building the ultimate data platform and then going out and say, please, somebody use it. We're not sure what it's even good for, and the business users as well. Do you have a case for us that can recuperate the cost for this? But if you have data scientists sitting out with the business people, and then you have a place for them to bring back the learnings so that you can spread those learnings and capabilities out to the rest of the organization. That does sound like federated, what you were describing. Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly what I mean. Yeah. And I agree with the organic thing, it doesn't work. We went through it as well. It doesn't work.
Data vendors, cobbler's shoes. It seems like we all get, where's your data team?
So you need that federated approach, I think, of a team that takes end responsibility of making sure that there's alignment, repeatability, consistency across the different data ops teams that you have in different lines of businesses. Otherwise, in the end, you will end up with things that only are usable within the line of business and not across the line of business.
Yeah.
So I'm as you have heard, I'm a big believer of the federated approach.
All right. Okay, so we have a couple of learnings to take away here. Let's see if we can wrap up a little bit. We have federated learning is one thing we've spoken about a fair bit today. Organic is not ideal, and doing everything up front is not going to work either. What do you think is the next step for companies that are getting mature in it today? I've said a couple of times here that the things we talk about now are the things that are going to be very practical in about 2 years. Like, what are we talking about now? What is the next step forward from data mesh? Anybody know the secret?
So mine, I guess we're all going to go for one. Mine is world building.
Okay.
So I think that we're starting to talk about data fabric, semantic layers. I think that every organization needs to start structuring out its understanding of its world, so its entities, its assets, its workflows, and I think that's very bespoke to each business. And I don't think vendors are quite. I think data catalog is getting there, but I think and semantic layer is getting there, but like really understanding, it's kind of semiotics. It's like, what's your understanding of the world? I think that's going to be the
Sounds
next
very
thing.
video game-like. I like that. What about you? What do you think is next?
I think data marketplace will be the next big thing.
Okay, both internal to companies and external?
I think initially first internal, make that work really well, and then try to see if we can go to a larger scale.
Right. You think companies are going to become more generous with sharing things externally?
I think so, and that's also what we start to pick up from our enterprise customers as well.
Is that a bit like Snowflake, like data sharing and data warehouse, data marketplace?
That's cool.
It's interesting.
We're actually working closely together with Snowflake on that policy management aspect.
Interesting.
What do you think? What's next in H&M and what's next in the world?
I think this sort of the revival, the next generation of data modeling. I mean, now we used to be the central model, star schema, Kimball style, you had its bottleneck, and then we took the data lake, no model, wasn't good either. With the data mesh, we are distributing it. There's going to be good models in the domains, but how do we get them as a consumer of many domains? How do we give them a holistic experience? We have thought a lot about how to do that. I mean, you want the mesh to behave like one piece when you consume it, without it being dependent. So it's certainly not trivial, but I think that's, I see people writing and thinking a lot about that, so it's probably something that's going to mature.
Amazing. Well, there you've heard it, both data mesh today and data mesh of the future. Thank you everybody for chatting with me about this. I think we could chat about it for a long while. Feel free to contact the guests on this panel. Stay tuned. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to have another session shortly thereafter. See you in the ether.